So what are we doing
Cheers.
here?
Talking. Apparently drinking too. I think that's probably a normal reaction considering
Swapped
everything right now.
alcohol for coffee in the state of the world.
Not Bailey's yet. We haven't made it to that point.
I felt like, I don't know about you guys, but when I was driving around Tucson today, I felt eeriness. I felt like everywhere I was going, I was being followed by an ambulance. And then the clouds turned dark. And
Is it an omen?
Yeah, it was very strange. And then I came home and wrote the script for this.
God damn.
Yeah, it was very strange to me.
I feel like the day kind of fit the overall mood of everything.
Yeah.
Kind of gloomy.
I stress bought like 2 plants because I felt the negativity on top of me constantly. I think social media right now, it's hard. You want to look, but it's also, you have to look away or else you're constantly just in a state of sadness. But that is the life of a journalist all the time. So
yeah, but I don't know. It feels like more so than usual. It's easy to get caught in that negative spiral. You're watching one video, then the next one, and then you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of media sometimes focuses on only the negative too, though. You know.
Exactly.
Just haven't really been many stories on the heroes during all of this. So there's been a couple posts, but usually it's a lot easier to see.
Yes.
It's more believable to see the bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, this is horrible, there's a problem, which in essence is kind of what journalism is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to call out when people are being corrupt or breaking rules.
Exactly.
It seems like there's this hypersensitivity to it now, though.
Yeah. It just feels I think right now, what is happening a lot with journalists, especially with this situation with George Floyd, is like, how do we stay neutral in journalism? That's like our main goal, right? In journalism, you want to hear all sides, but how do you do that with something that's so particularly heinous that you in your core belief know is wrong? And if you watch the video, it's obviously probably one of the worst things I've ever seen on social media, but like, how are you supposed to, journalists, we're not supposed to attend protests if we're not covering it. So I've been grappling with this a lot lately. I want to go there, but if I go there, I have to go in full covering, because if there's any evidence of me attending a protest and my future bosses see that, I'll get fired, or they'll say you can't cover any of these stories because you obviously have a bias towards it. So it's just really hard to remain neutral, but at my core, I know that this is a problem, like a systemic problem. I think everybody's feeling that right now.
Do you think them pushing for objectivity takes away some of the powerful aspects of journalism, though, which is storytelling? Even if it might not be always necessarily objective, doesn't necessarily mean it's not true, you know?
Yes.
So you can say something that's very true, but it's not to the fact, you know? This is not exactly what happened, but
exactly.
this is how it feels to people.
Yeah, it's so, at least with this case, I think, there was a CNN journalist, a Black CNN journalist, who was arrested during the protest on air. This journalist was arrested on air.
Was he just doing his own? He was just hanging out?
He was recording, and they identified themselves as journalists to the police officers. You can see it in the video. And he's standing there. He's like, we're in Minneapolis, da da da. And obviously behind us we have police officers. And an officer comes out of nowhere, and he's like, I'm gonna arrest you. And then reads him his rights and takes him behind this line of police officers. And the journalist on the air
what just happened?
What just happened? And so at this point, it's now become the police against. It almost feels like police against media and citizens. So in that sense, it's nice because we know that we do have a side, and that for once, I think citizens know that we have a right to be there. But it's interesting that the police now, normally the police have used the media in all situations to manipulate a situation. But in that instance, I was like, wow, you've chosen sides, obviously, very much obviously.
Yeah, I wonder how, because it seems like it's a new relation that there is video of arrests and things happening with police. I feel like that's caused a new way for police to view media, social media, and the news. It seems like before that, it used to be only time you hear about a cop or something like that, normally it was in a positive light, but now that there's all these videos that prove otherwise, they, it's more of a threat to them.
Yeah, everybody can be a journalist now.
It's cool.
And it's interesting too, it kind of brings up the idea too of there's a new form of journalism called advocacy journalism. And a lot of people would say that that's PR. It's like a big talk in journalism right now of, are you an advocate because you're like advocating for a certain social group or a certain, organization, but they're still reporting on the facts and like sticking to the facts, but they're called advocacy journalists. It's very strange dynamic. I don't know. But this situation in general just brings that all back up again. It's like, okay, well now if journalists say anything bad about police officers, are we advocacy journalists for Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, it seems like they associate themselves with, people can't associate themselves with you at that point if you're kind of on the same side, you have similar values.
Exactly.
And then it's interesting to figure out where you actually stand as a journalist. You have to build up your own personal brand, I guess.
Yeah, that's very true. It's just hard.
Do you think most media towards police was positive before this, though?
Before this incident, but just like before the shifts in like
media.
Yeah.
It's like cops were kind of the heroes.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just gonna say I actually saw something on Twitter today about how there was like 2 articles going around about cops kneeling with protesters and like praying, and then in the next minute they were like throwing tear gas at the protesters, but they did the kneeling so the media could get the shot.
No way.
And that of course is on Twitter allegedly, but it's just interesting, seeing the articles and then seeing people's comments next to it being like, and then an hour later they fucking shot us with tear gas. So you can tell they're like trying to get back with the media, but it's just not working. Like it's just not working. People know what's going on. They're there. The other hard part about it too, I think, is that a lot of people who are protesting or who are there, journalists want to know what's going on. Like, I don't know, there've been a lot of reports, in the protests of other people coming into the protests. They're not associated with the organization and inciting the riots and violence. And we don't know if that's true because the protesters who were there, who would see it, don't want to be named. They don't want their names out there, and it's understandable. But it's also like, I really like to have that evidence to know, and then we can find who it is and make sure that people know that this whole movement that's happening isn't just about violence. Like, once again, there's somebody else who's causing it, but I don't know. You guys heard anything about that?
And before you were talking about it, so.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'd kind of heard something. That's why you're here.
That's why I'm here, the resident journalist.
Right. I heard that happening with COVID too. So people have kind of forgotten about it since all this broke out.
Oh my God, I know. That's another thing I worry about, is that so far statistically we're seeing that Black Americans are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So far, what the data is showing us. And now, because of all this, I'm like, oh my God. And then also cops are using tear gas during a time when we're having a pandemic of a respiratory illness.
Yeah, I didn't connect that until you brought
and it's
that up.
like, to me, I know that's not like a conspiracy thing, but to me, it almost feels really weird. They insisted on using tear gas during this time to a group who's disproportionately affected by this pandemic. It just feels very off to me.
Yeah, it is very off.
Plus tear gas is, I mean, you see the videos, they like pour milk on people's faces and it's just awful. I've never been tear gas, but I imagine it's painful. Have you?
No.
Oh my God, I was gonna say, I was like, you have to tell me what that's like. It sounds terrible.
Like burns, horrific burning.
Yeah, I
Just
would
doesn't
imagine.
stop.
Yeah, because it looks like these like giant clouds of just like
it's gotta be. Yeah, you gotta be. Eyes must be pretty like sensitive to any amount of it too. It seems like even a small amount, at least from video I've seen, people will be like, right off the bat,
that's true.
Or start coughing.
Yeah.
Body rejects it.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
This is the thing I kind of want to talk about with you guys, though. What I've heard is the big pivot point for this whole thing is changing the conversation, because majority group being white, maybe unintentionally is oppressing a lot of people. We don't intend to, we just aren't conscious of all the suffering. And with this all, everything having to slow down, and then people being at home with their own problems, and then they see some shit like that go down, everything kind of blew up. And then have the killing of George Floyd, which was horrific, alongside people not being able to pay their bills, and then it just kind of creates all these negative feelings, and then people hit a tipping point and blow up.
Right.
But a lot of people are saying this has been happening for years. Just people were on their own bullshit and didn't acknowledge it. Predominantly the majority groups, which would probably be white people, as much as we're not evil with horns on our head. At least I don't think so. I mean, everybody's can be equally evil, but we're all human. But we just didn't acknowledge that this was happening, either through our behaviors or our actions or our thoughts or our words. And what this is a tipping point to change the conversation and acknowledge that we all are human, you know? And that Black lives matter. And yes, all lives matter inherently, but that's not really the problem. The problem is that people who are Black are being treated as if they're not human. Even if it's not by words, it's by actions. Right. So it's like, what do we do to change that? And we are a very young country, so it's like figuring that out. But because it really, like 1963 was when this segregation, legal racism ended. Which I'm not sure if that year is exactly correct, but
it was not that far away.
It's
like
60s,
it's so close. It's so
that's
close.
our grandparents. And they peed in different bathrooms. That's crazy. That's just normal. You know.
It's interesting how society can like set a standard of what is normal, but now if we were to go back then, like I feel like all of us would just be sitting there like, what? The glitch. Oh my god. The simulation has been glitched. I don't understand.
On a lighter note, even smoking was encouraged back then.
Yeah, that is very true.
Physical exercise was quirky. If you were actually doing that, by working out so much, you don't need to do that unless you had a reason.
Physical exercise.
Unless you had like a reason to. You know, you were like a laborer, or you like worked out in the fields. If you didn't, it's just kind of odd. If you don't have to work like that, why are you doing that?
Going back to what you're talking about, though, I think, and I've been victim of it, not victim of it. I've noticed myself doing it as well. I think a lot of white people, especially younger white people, kind of get this sense of defensiveness when, I'm talking about these subjects, because they're like, well, I don't think I'm racist, but then it gets this pushback, and it's like, that's not how it should be. We should be able to acknowledge that, even if it's not us that set up this system, which may be true, we are now a part of the system, and not being able to acknowledge that is the problem.
Yes, it's a really good point. And what I think is interesting is pinpointing where the racism starts. So does it start in fear, or does it start in hatred? What is it exactly? I think, why would you ever be racist towards someone? It might be because you're afraid they might hurt you, or they might judge you, or they might affect your family or your in-group, so you bar them off. And then I think people don't always want to acknowledge that part of themselves, that I'm bad to that person because I'm scared, because it takes a lot of introspection. And it's a lot easier to brush it off and say, okay, I like everybody the same, but then in your actions, you treat one person obviously different than another.
I think with this event too, like just coming off of like what the core issue is, for me personally, when all this is happening, I just think a lot about when I was much younger. I had dated a man who was Black, and it was not a good relationship. And I think because of that relationship, which was more abusive, I had formalized in my mind that I would associate any Black man with that person that I was with because of those traumas.
It's fear.
Exactly, it's fear. And of course, I don't feel that way about any Black women. And, I have friends, obviously, who are Black women, but when it comes to Black men, my first reaction is always fear. But that comes from, like, that root of trauma situation. And so I myself just need to, like, not, because we're not all the same person. Like, if I had had that experience with a white man, would I feel the same way?
Right.
That's a good question.
It's like the trauma and then the person,
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to all people are the trauma. And then your brain, it just goes straight to like people trauma because it paired it.
Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
I've just been trying to work on like separating that. So I feel like I too often do that. I'm too fearful in a lot of situations when I don't need to be. I mean, Devin sees me at night. I just get too fearful in any situation, and I need to just like relax that, especially with this situation. It's like, why are we thinking of each other as symbols of fear and not as other human beings? Unless we are in a fearful situation at night by yourself.
Yeah. Well, I
Middle
think,
of the road.
I think there's excuses. I mean, not excuses, sorry. There's good reasons to be afraid in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah.
It's just your body telling you, like, you should probably pay more attention.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually
Yeah,
thinking
that's
about
true.
this, like, earlier in the week. When I thought I saw something when we were having that conversation at the pool, but it makes sense if you're in the plains and you're like, the tiger's gonna attack me. And so you
Mhm.
freak out and your whole body goes like ramp mode.
Yeah.
But if you do that for like weeks on end, your brain's just like, there's no tiger, but my hair's falling out. And it's not so good anymore. But it's great.
And that's on period.
Yeah. But it's great technically, but not in every situation.
Exactly.
And sometimes people are just hyper drive to freak out about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true.
Which is, I think, understandable, and I think it should be part of the discussion. But I think, and I've seen this argument before that that should be permissible or reason why maybe a police officer acts in a certain way, or like bring it to. Don't need to continue to point fingers at police officers. We get enough of that right now, but even in our own lives, like. I think the initial response or the pairing, the fear response to things is like human response. That's not something we can change, but it doesn't mean we have to act a certain
It doesn't
way.
mean it's right. Yeah, it just means it's not unnatural.
Right. So it happens, but the way we react to it is what's important. Like maybe let's say the man that killed George Floyd had an initial fear reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It didn't mean he had to put his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and kill him. That's too simple.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the other thing too. If he does have a fear reaction like that, why wasn't he seeking therapy? Why wasn't he honest about these things that were going on with him? Like, I feel like in my life, I've attempted to seek therapy for the things that have happened to me in those situations, because nobody needs to constantly think that way about another, group of people or another set of people just because of like one traumatic experience that you have in your life.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of cathartic, like it's very releasing to be horrible.
Exactly.
The therapy, yes, but also like being bad to other people or being vicious or being abusive. It feels good because you get rid of that pressure.
Well, like taking control of the situation.
Yeah,
like
but
feeling
also,
like you have control.
Or you're doing something, or you feel like you can't control anything, so you're doing something, just struggling. It's kind of like why people cut themselves if they're depressed. They don't know what to do with all that pain. So it's like, I can control this, I feel the pain, it's tension, and then it releases, and I feel better.
Gotcha.
I feel like that's kind of what is happening. A buddy of mine posted something on his Instagram story, but he was talking about how all the riots is kind of like how a really depressed person will start self-harming themselves, but it's just happening at a cultural level and societal level now, which I thought was a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And it seems to be what's kind of happening. It's just they just feel so trapped, and the conversation's not changing, it's not happening quickly, and they get subliminal racism all the time from people. So it's like, fuck it, the whole game's screwed up. So I'm just going to flip the Monopoly board upside down.
And they're already at home, like stuck in home. Everybody's at home, so they're not going to their jobs. And I think, what you were talking about, like, they're kind of in this pressure cooker and then they pull out. Like, you're in this pandemic, and normally before the pandemic, I felt like people weren't really, I felt like a lot of people were social media protesters, constantly saying
everybody was an influencer.
Yeah, everybody's an influencer, focusing on social media. This happens, and I feel like everything has exploded the way it needs to explode, because we haven't had protests like these in so long, and it's like about time that it's happened, because it's pressure.
Yeah, well, it was interesting too, because I think this is something minority groups get upset about too, is they get dismissed a lot. So people will be like, I'm having a problem, and then people will be like, I don't see a problem. They'll be like, I'm having a problem. So they'll be like, the game is fair. And then they're like, I can't pay and climb the ladder. And they're like, no, you're fine. Or they'll be like, oh, my whole family got their property taken from them from some rich dude, and now my family's like separated. Like, you can push through, and then they'll say, "Oh, my dad got arrested when I was 8 for something he really didn't do."
Right.
And I'm like, "No, you're fine. Like, I'm sorry, that's horrible, but like even if it's not completely verbal, it's with like language and our policies and stuff like that. People would just be like, well, you can still pursue the American dream, but like it's not working for me.
The American, pull it up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, but it's people.
You can do it all on your own.
People who look like me though, and like Devin, specifically males who come from like middle class, working class, that push that message though, you know, that are part of the majority group.
Yes, and that's a question for you guys actually, like being cis white males. How has your experience been in this situation? Because I mean, I feel like as white people, we should feel a guilt, an overwhelming guilt. At least I do. I feel an overwhelming guilt for all the things that have happened in history, which doesn't make anything better, by the way. Whoever's watching and listening, doesn't make anything better, but there is a guilt. But also, as a white male, you are typically the person who is targeted for anything. In any situation, people are like, it's the fucking cis white men, you know? And how does that, yeah, exactly, like how does that make you feel as people?
It made me, you go ahead, Devin, I'm sorry.
No, you had it ready, I'm still thinking.
I'm kind of grateful for it, because it's actually making me realize how deep the pain is for a lot of people, like how deep the cuts are. I could kind of see them, but now I'm like, oh, you know, like this is a lot deeper than I thought it was. And also I had a thought the other day where I was scared for a second about my own family, which a lot of people have experienced, but because they're in like a kind of an upper middle class neighborhood right now.
Right.
For kind of the demographic here. But I was wondering, what if someone just broke into their complex and stole their stuff and held them at gunpoint? And then I was scared for a second. I was like, oh, what I'm feeling right now, you can empathize and be like, that's how Black folks can feel normally growing up. Like that's just
all
normal.
The time.
Yeah. I was like, well, shit, that makes more sense now. And I've had a little epiphany. It's just a lot. And I'm happy it's happening at 22. Because I'm still very impressionable, so I can change my outlook on things and actually do something in my late 20s and 30s.
Absolutely.
But I'm pretty grateful for it, and I get why it's happening, and I don't expect people to listen to what I'm saying, but I just don't think that it's like an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So I really don't want to see more pain and bloodshed because people are struggling. I'd rather emphasize the peaceful protesters and really try to elevate their message, you know?
Right.
And then I'm very for changing the platform for the conversation in a way that's virtuous. So you give everybody a chance to contribute. But that doesn't mean it's out of spite at any point, because I've heard even stuff like I've had buddies, like I knew people in Hawaii that would kind of say this too, but jokingly, but like, oh, well, like second revolution, like Black people will oppress white people. I'm like, that's not okay. But then they kind of just, it's half a joke, but it's half true a little bit. All jokes have a piece of truth in them, but it'll be like, fuck you guys for all you've done to us. I'm like, fair, we have been assholes.
Right.
But it doesn't help humanity moving forward to create that flip, you know?
Yeah, but it's also not like, well, subliminal racism, yes, but the systematic racism is the fault of the government. It's just systematically, constantly trying to put down these minorities.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't even want to say minorities, because actually the United States by like 2025 is going to be mainly
Asian.
Hispanic is what I was going to say.
I was just guessing.
No, it's just the migration from Mexico. It looks like it's going to be pretty evened out soon. So I don't even know if we should. That's like a whole other conversation in itself of why we still call people minorities when like this country is slowly like morphing into something more diverse and beautiful than we can even imagine.
Which is awesome, but I think that comes at the price of people losing their privilege, and people don't always like that.
God,
which I
can't lose my privilege.
But it's true though. But a lot of people have had it, and they don't always acknowledge that they are privileged. And maybe privilege isn't the right word. Maybe blessed is a little bit softer. But people have had a lot of blessings that are in majority groups.
Yeah.
And have family connections and other things where they kind of have a life path fall in front of them a little bit more.
Right.
And they have some agency in having that happen, but at the same token, it's different than a minority in an area where there's a lot of racism, who's the same inherent value as another human who's a good person, and he can't climb the ladder or she can't climb it. And it just keeps going. But the issue is like you can't. I think if you focus on the oppression, you can let it own you. And that's where some minorities have gotten stuck, is that you have to kind of try to transcend it, but it's really fucking hard to do it. But
It's really, really hard.
because it's technically, you can come up with reasons that you're oppressed by a number of things, but they are, though, literally, as well. So it's that weird balance. Yeah, but like, say you're like a black woman in a racist town, you got a lot going against you.
God, everything.
Yeah. What do you guys think? My brain just went here.
No, you didn't answer the question that I asked.
For me, I don't know if guilt is the right word. I think more so along the same lines as you're able to acknowledge and truly like see what's going on. I think for me personally, getting caught up in guilt may not necessarily lead to action. You can feel guilty about something in the past and not foreseeably change your actions, but not saying that you can either too, but
maybe it's guilt for me because I feel like I can't protest because of the career I've chosen.
Okay.
Maybe in that sense, but doesn't mean I won't go in with an outfit with my face covered and do it anyways. But
but I wonder what you guys think about, because it seems like younger generation of white people don't necessarily have a problem at least acknowledging how we're dealing with it's a different story, but acknowledging white privilege. But it seems like there's a divide, and the older generation has a difficult time accepting white privilege. I wonder, do you think that's because, like, by acknowledging white privilege, it may undermine kind of what they've done with their lives? Like,
I think so.
And maybe it's not entirely by virtue that maybe of color of their skin.
They didn't do it all by themselves.
Yeah.
Pull it up by the bootstraps.
Right.
It's an interesting.
I think it's true. It's so hard to think about, though, when you agree, because both sides are kind of true in some way, because you do have to actually like live your life and try to carve a path for yourself. But there are times when the game's not fair. So it's kind of like the meme where there's a 6, and then one person's pointing at it and saying it's a 6, and the other person's pointing at it and saying no, it's a 9. That's just two different perspectives of the same object.
Right.
In essence, it's both.
Yes.
But I pause saying that because some people have made arguments online against that. But I saw it and I was like, you motherfucker. It's like, this is so not important. But it's like 6 and 9, but it's just pointing at something, and both people are kind of right, and they feel that they're right. But at the same token, I feel like, I don't know, the pain's so deep that it can't really be ignored anymore among these groups.
Yes.
I think we've hit and I wonder, because I feel like we've said this in the past with the same issue with race in this country, but it really feels like we're at a tipping point where there's no just going back to status quo. You know.
Yep.
What that looks like, no fucking clue, but
I'm really quite interested. I do feel like it's a tipping point. But with this upcoming election.
Hey, Andrew Yang or something. Have you heard of him? You don't like him?
Andrew Yang?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't not like him. He's pretty funny.
You think he's fun? Oh, is he?
He came up with, what's it called? Fucking...
Universal basic income.
Yes, thank you. Say it in the long way for dumbasses like me. Okay. Universal basic income. Yes, he came up with that. Yeah.
I thought he's the first person who's made any sense, I feel like.
And like currently what he's saying? Because I don't know. I don't know
currently. I was just looking at some of it. Hopefully this doesn't condone me to say I'm supporting him, but like I'm not endorsing him. It's just like I saw some stuff he was writing, and I was like, okay, it's kind of intelligible when you thought about what you said before you said it.
Yeah. As
opposed to our other two candidates where it's just they're shitting out their mouths. You know, either Trump is just kind of confidently saying something and then working the crowd, or Biden can't speak.
Yeah.
And he's just muttering words and slurring his words. I wish him the best, but like, you can't. I don't want him leading my country, dude. Like, Jesus.
Either way,
I don't think anybody else does
it's
either.
It's like a damn crapshoot. Like, either way, it's just going to turn out not great.
Like, why is Biden the majority guy? Is that like set?
Oh yeah.
What the
He's
fuck?
Primary candidate.
Yep, he's set.
Who did that? Who
Us.
thought that was a good idea? I did not do that. I did not vote for that shit. I didn't vote for either.
Neither did I, so I'm not talking shit. I didn't vote either, but we did.
Yeah.
The American people did that, I guess. I mean, that's the only, you gotta take ownership. But
I mean, the primary gets a little fucky sometimes. The person that gets the least amount of votes still wins, but Democratic primary.
Well, no,
Joe
Bernie
Biden.
rescinded. He ended his campaign.
Really?
yeah, it's just what were our choices?
Was it because he was, down by a considerable amount, though?
I can't remember. Oh God, feels like it was years ago. It's when I read this article. I have to remember. Yeah, right? He ended his campaign last year. That was a couple months ago.
Well, it wasn't 20. No, it wasn't 20.
I just told
yeah, it was a couple months ago.
No, yeah, it was 2020. But yeah, he rescinded his because I think Biden was winning by a little, or the Democratic, whatever it's called. Oh my God, I'm supposed to know these things.
Convention.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Democratic convention, they were all supporting Joe Biden because.
This is a fucking.
I mean, free country. I have my First Amendment right, but I'm like, he's fucking retarded. Like, they're serious though. Like, it's just, I'm sorry.
Don't use that word.
I'm so sorry.
Don't use that word.
I don't mean it in terms of people like that. I mean like systems not working right, and with him, in him, his beliefs are all skewed and.
And it's just all to like get the black vote. If you notice, everything he does, he's like, I worked with Obama.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
I know him. That's my man.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, he's perfect. He's perfect. And it's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Everything he was doing, he was like garnering to the black vote, which is great. That's a great thing. But Bernie was doing that with Hispanic voters. Like, he was getting all of their votes as well. So it was just.
I feel like it was much more authentic.
Yeah,
it was authentic. He wasn't trying to use Barack Obama as like a pawn.
I don't know. The only thing with Bernie that I thought was quirky was he was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and Joe kept asking him what exactly would be the financial plan with everything you're talking about. Like, how do you actually take money from the rich people,
right,
and distribute it? And he dodged the question like 3 times, and then Joe kept asking and he wouldn't answer it. And I was like,
interesting.
That's the only point where, because like you can't just say you're gonna do something and then not have a plan and go back to the same point over and over again. I think anymore. I think that might have worked earlier in media because you had sound bites and like little segments. People were like, oh, that resonates, and I like the brand he's giving off. But nowadays it's all this stuff and long form, and people can, and sometimes people are just sitting, driving to work or in their offices, and they want to learn and be like, oh, what exactly is the plan, Mr. Leader? And if you're like, we're taking it from the rich people and they make the laws, and if you just say that over and over again, you lose people, because it's like, I get they do that and I'm not happy about it, and the 1% might be doing a lot of sketchy shit, but how exactly are we distributing it? Unless you can, I feel like you have to give like a comprehensive plan to a good amount of voters for them to sit with it. And one step further, you have to take that comprehensive plan and boil it down to
make it feasible.
To bullet points. So the point where like you're busy, you got shit going on, but you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And you can take like 6 points. And you'd be like, that plan makes sense. That plan doesn't. I like this plan. I'm gonna vote for this person.
Yeah.
It's just so complicated. And even if you have a good plan, you might have to compromise on 2 sections of it because you got to work with other people. They don't want that plan.
Yeah.
That's the whole predicament of politics. It's like so-and-so from Nebraska doesn't want that, but you want in Ohio. And then you're going to go and support one of their bills. They support yours. It's like a weird game of reciprocity.
Inches.
Yeah. That's why I chose to never cover Washington, D.C. because it's horrible.
Well, it's like democracy kind of stays stagnated, it feels like. And then, I don't know, there's 2 views. Like, either just stay stagnated, and maybe that's a good thing because it's better than a revolution where a lot of people die, and it's better than a complete impoverished society. Or you could say that you can be like liberal, progressive, say it slowly gets better. Or you could say that people are saying that it's getting better, but that's just a story that we're told, and then it actually just isn't.
Right. Well, I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Is we're being told that we're like best in the country, best in the world. we have everything we need, everything is great in America, when in reality we have people in ICE is taking people out of their homes, putting them in camps, and Black people are being killed in the streets for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And
It seems like
I think our generation is the one that's going to change it all, just because we're realizing once again the status quo is not okay. It's not where we need to be.
Yeah.
You know, that this is all a lie.
Well, it seems like we're deluded. We're a little delusional right now.
Yeah.
We're in our little bubble. We're in like in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
Where we look out and we just like that we swim up. So we see all these other countries, but we have no fucking idea what they're doing unless like you're 1% that kind of is interested in our country. I mean, it's probably more than that, but a lot of time like, we don't know other languages that well. You know, we're just like fuck it, we're the #1 in the world, best economy, but every other country learns like 4 languages. I work with a Moroccan fella. He knows 5 languages. And they learn like 2 in school. A lot of people learn stuff. Learn schools and school. A lot of people learn things in school that are actually
into that beer, sir.
Exactly. But they'll learn things that are actually applicable. Where it seems like a lot of in our society, we didn't really learn things that were applicable through most of our education. We just learned how to answer multiple choice questions to pass a test and then go to college. And that was our saving grace. And we got to college. I don't know about you guys, but I got to college and I realized it was high school again, except I'm paying $6,000 every. I'm fortunate, but I'm paying like $6,000 every semester, as opposed to having it provided by taxpayers. So it's pretty dumb, unless you get like a STEM degree.
Well, and the thing too, I think it was France, which European country, they like as soon as you go into middle school, they like tailor you towards where they think your craft is going to be, so you continue going on this trajectory of what your interests are forever. Whereas like I think in America we go to college and we like find ourselves.
It's like just do what you want.
And then in 4 years, you're like, I still haven't found myself. I don't know what I'm doing.
There's a lot of pressure too. I feel like you need a skill. It's like, what can you learn that's a skill that provides that state wants?
Exactly.
And then you can do your other things on the side if you want to, and then you can monetize that maybe in the future.
But that's another kind of sign of privilege, though. Going back to the theme of this podcast is we are able to go throughout high school without knowing the skill that we have, to get to college, to learn a fucking skill.
But you don't sometimes.
But you don't, and then you're like, I gotta go back to school. And we can do that because we can take loans out, because we have good credit, because of our parents.
Yeah.
Because we didn't start off badly.
Yeah, but I agree 100%. But then it almost seems like there's a deeper problem because people who actually need to go to school to get a practical skill and aren't educated on that. Say they do something they kind of enjoy, like even philosophy or something, and you get a degree in that, which you can make that work out. I hope so. I'm fine.
He's open.
But sociology or something, you go to school for that, and then you're upset because you can't find a job right out of school. And it's like, well, they kind of sold this lie that was maybe well-intentioned by universities where in our culture where it's like you can do whatever you want to do and you can be whatever you want to be. And it's fun to listen to, but at the same token, it's like you got to balance that with being reasonable. Where it's like I need a job, I do something. I don't want to work at Circle K, which is not a bad job, but it's like maybe you don't want to work at Circle K. You don't want to be a waiter your whole life. I'd say, well,
maybe you want to own the Circle K.
Yeah, which is honestly what a lot of people go to Eller for. You know, it's just a lot of glam alongside it, in my opinion, which I might piss some people off saying that probably, but
I know a lot of people who go to Eller, the business school at the University of Arizona, who get their degree. I have 2 friends who got their degree or getting out, and they're like, I think I'm going to do something. I went to Eller.
Exactly.
I may or may not do something in my major.
It's whole rah though. It's like that's a big thing with Eller. Like we're the best in the world. Like you're gonna be fantastic. You're just going to Eller. You're good. You're fine. And then everyone feeds it because it feels good to feed it.
Just like
yeah, but it's like, what are you doing exactly? You know.
Yeah. Have you guys noticed? I've been through the system now. If you went back and looked at some of the different like majors, and when they describe them on the websites, kind of like the ones that are very practical, and they're like, you can do this and make this amount of money, and this, this, and this. There's other ones like, oh, study this, and it's like
yeah, exactly.
3 or 4 sentences.
Yeah, but isn't that the difference between engineering and like some of the humanities now? Though, because engineering, it's like this is what you're gonna do. It's about to be this hard. You just need to get the degree. You can work here, here, and here. You make roughly this salary, and you do like psychology, which sucks because like I love psychology, and you do too, and you do too because you're a journalist. but and like philosophy as well. But it was just like, this is some cool stuff.
Figure it out.
And that was it. Literally, that was it. It was never like this is how your job prospects might look.
Yeah.
Realistically, this is like, if you're going to take this seriously, you should probably get a really good GPA and apply to these schools if you want to be a higher ed teacher. Instead, it's just like, you can do it, study it. And it's just like, there's no ending to the sentence.
But I think
that's our whole fucking humanities department now. It's stupid.
I feel like this is a personal issue.
It is. I've been like sitting with it for like 3 years, but it's just so annoying.
That is hard. But I think don't put yourself down, because I do think that studying humanities of any sort is imperative when it comes to situations like what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I see a direct link. For some reason, it's being called liberal, but I think it's being educated on the humanities and history.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's undeniably the most useful information you can have in situations like this, because my conservative family, who've majored in practical things like business and STEM, they have very conservative views and dare not to see it from the other side,
right,
from people who haven't been in their position. So I think in that sense, you can't put yourself down, because at least you understand how the world works.
Yeah.
And you're not always thinking in dollar signs.
Right.
Because that to me is worse. I'm going to be a very poor person, by the way, too. Everybody was.
Yeah, it's like, well, I always like to think of it as how are you getting paid though? Are you getting paid in just pure dollars, or are you doing something you love and you're getting fulfillment, which is different?
Yes.
Or is it your fuel? And if you're doing your fuel, then who cares? Because then you're waking up every day and your spirit is happy. Yes. That matters a lot more, in my opinion. I'd rather make like $50K a year and be like thrilled to do my job every day.
Mm-hmm.
Which maybe just is propaganda from my upbringing too. It might be, but I think it's deeper than that. It's like, I'd rather just feed my fuel and make enough money and make sure my kids are okay. And I'm providing, and I'm like, they're not like I draw a line there. It's like, if I could still be a provider, or I'm with a partner and we're both creating enough to be providers, chilling.
Yeah. Well, you see what happens to people when they make triple digits.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem in our country right now. That 1% that's making too much and they're not doing the right things with it. So at that point, you're not happy. You're filling the void with something else.
I don't know if we're diverging. We are diverging a lot at this point, but from the original discussion, we kind of are staying in line with it. But I always think it's interesting how our physical and mental health and our spiritual health are not prioritized as much as our material health, if that makes sense. It's all like, what do you have? Like, how much of it do you have? Do you have enough money? Are you making a lot of money? And it's really interesting, because if you talk about strict business, people like gear right in our society, which is kind of interesting, even among our age too. It's just, if you start talking in business terms, people like lock in right off the bat. But if you talk about like spirituality, people like zone out.
Yeah.
Or even music with certain crowds, they'll just kind of like, But if you're like, oh, this is my plan, this is how I monetize it, this is who I'm talking to, this is like my target market, this is how we talk to each other. More business terms that I'm blanking on right now that people like
communications.
But back to your point, there's that disconnect from like maybe a deeper existence and way to live, and that probably is why a lot of us are so blind to the deep pain of some of our fellow citizens, because we can't resonate with it.
Yeah.
But we're choosing not to, and because it's painful to do that, and it's a lot easier to focus on playing the arcade game, which is a cute way to put it, but that's kind of like playing business sometimes. It's tied in with your life's work, but on some levels, it's kind of like, how do I get a high score? It's like, holy fuck, like I got 3 billion points.
Yeah.
And then I got a bunch of tokens. Like, I can get a teddy bear now. Like, I can get the thing. Like,
and that's all that matters.
I can get the Chinese finger trap. It's like, if I do it 3 more times, like maybe get something else.
Right. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you play different games. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. But
you think that's them brainwashing us into capitalism at a young age?
See, but that
dun, dun, dun!
But at the same token, that kind of maybe. But capitalism feeds off of consumerism, so you need it. You don't always want people to think either. You just want them to buy. At least the baby version of capitalism that's all angsty.
Even when it comes to spiritualism, like Americans are first. I mean, you see this with like the New Age spiritualist movement. Our first contact with kind of Eastern ideas of spirituality, Buddhism, Hinduism, or we're like crystals, so we gotta buy crystals.
Yeah.
Sage, so we gotta buy sage.
Right.
We gotta get things. We gotta
T-shirts.
get the bowls. We gotta
Some
get
psychedelic.
we gotta get the things, and it's like meditation is free.
Yeah.
Prayer is free.
Mm-hmm.
Yoga is free if you wish to do it on your own. I mean, start by going to classes first, but like if you do it on your own as your own practice, that is free.
Isn't that the great thing about the essence of spiritual practices, though? You don't need anything.
Yeah, but I mean, even myself, when I was younger, I assumed that crystals were the answer. But now, as I'm older and have gotten a degree in religious studies, I realized that all of that crap was, like instilled with the consumerism, capitalism thing. Americans took those fabulous, fantastic ideas, morphed them, bastardized them with something else that was attached to a monetary consumption. And I mean, oh my gosh, if you look at the New York, like best-selling New York Times, any time of the day, any day, like any day of the year, it's always the top books are self-help books, spiritual books. And they're selling the most.
Yeah, it's industry.
And biographies.
But I sometimes think, though, I mean, that's the toxic side of it, is if people are exploiting others. But at the same token, it can be very beneficial to people. Like the 12-step program was the initial, that was like the first self-help book. And it's still is its own religion almost.
That is very true.
It helps a lot of people live their lives on. It's a company that creates a lot of supplements. I can't vouch that all of them work. I don't know, but get pretty good reviews. And it's all about, there's different human optimization companies that are coming out and how to change your diet to live better and feel better.
Right.
And that's something people didn't have access to years before. Not necessarily.
Well, I think that's a great change. I mean, changing your diet as opposed to being like, drink cinnamon lemon water for a week and you're gonna lose 50 pounds. Like, no, it does not work. That's not science. But if a company is saying, get a diet together, do this and this, maybe don't do keto for like 5 years.
Yeah, apparently your liver shuts down. Not too fun. Yeah.
So to keep this short and simple, do we want to cut it? I think we could continue to talk, but
all done.
Yep.
That's it.
Cool.